Are they lying to us when it comes to fat cap up versus fat cap down? Today, we're gonna find out. What's up, barbecue fans? My name is Jake, and today we're talking fat cap up versus fat cap down. Traditionally, I have done a fat cap up on my Yoder since day one. And my reasoning for that is because the Yoder is designed similar to an offset, right? We've got a firebox over here, we've got a chimney stack over here, and what happens is all that heat and air comes over top of the brisket and out the stack. So even though our heat source is below, I do fat cap up. Even on my Kamado cooking, I've found that fat cap down doesn't work for me. I don't like it. So our heat source is below on a Kamado. I'm still doing it fat cap up there because I like it to protect the top of it and render out and add some moisture there. And I think it's just a better chew. Now, late last year, Smokin' Joe Pit Barbecue did a video on his Yoder, and I can't remember the premise of the video, but he did a brisket on there and he did it fat cap down. And I commented on the video and I said, why are you doing it fat cap down? And he said, because he thought it gave a better result. I'll find that comment. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'll pop it up right here. And so I've been thinking about that since, but as you guys know, I've turned out some pretty damn good briskets in the last 6 months here, 8 months. And honestly, maybe 2 months ago, I did my best brisket yet. I'll put a link up here, but let me tell you, it was pretty damn good. So today I was like, you know what? I'm gonna flip the script. I'm gonna throw it fat cap down and see what happens. This morning, early this morning, let me tell you, I picked up a brisket on Friday night. It is Sunday. I got rained out yesterday, so this morning at 6, I'm scrambling to get things done. And I unpacked. We got a choice grade brisket from Costco, and I knew out of the gate that that brisket was not exactly as good as I wanted. I could tell we were gonna have some issues with it. Looks like we got a cloud coming over. But the selection was almost non-existent. So I was pretty unhappy with the brisket that I got. So when I got out of the package, I could tell right away this guy was gonna take some work. It had some scalping. It had like a double mohawk thing going on the back of it, and the end of it was in bad shape. So I scalped this thing pretty aggressively. I started on the top. I took all the silver skin off, or the bulk of it off, some of that white, thicker fat. Then I went down the front edge, and then I went down the other edge, and I cleaned up the one end of it, and then I flipped it over and I worked on the fat cap. Again, the fat cap had like this double mohawk thing going on. Really wasn't pleased with the way it looked. So I went pretty aggressive, and to be honest, I rushed this trim, so I did scalp it in a couple spots, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I'm not trying to turn out the perfect brisket. I'm just trying to do an experiment. So once I had it trimmed down, I took some salt and pepper. Earlier, before I started trimming my brisket, I got up my pepper can in, and I mixed up 3 tablespoons of a mix of smoked pepper and regular pepper, and just a coarse grind on there. I got about 3 tablespoons of that. Then about a tablespoon of Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. Mix that into my jar, gave it a good coating on the bottom, well, what would be the top. No, I started on the fat cap, so I started on the part that was gonna go down. And what happened there is I gave it a good coating, then I got it some Lowry seasoned salt, gave it a coating, got the sides, flipped it over, and then I did what is gonna be our top today, right? The non-fat cap. Gave that a coating, and I let it sit for a good 15 minutes on the counter while I came out and fired up the Yoder. We're working with some Bear Mountain Barbecue oak pellets today. I filled up my hopper, then I filled up my smoke tube. I lit up my smoke tube and let that go for about a minute or two. And then we fired up the Yoder, and for the last 4.5 hours, I've been running at 200, right? So I set us at 200, I threw the brisket on there. We did a cold start with our smoke tube and just let some smoke roll. And it's been about 4.5 hours, not quite 4.5 hours. The one thing I'll tell you out of the gate is I'm noticing that it's drying out a little quicker than I'm used to. So I have been spraying it, but let's have a look. We'll open this up. So as you can see, it's pretty darn dry. I've got 50-50 water, apple cider vinegar. I started spraying about 2.5 hours in. I was curious, I took a look at it, and I noticed just how dry it was. So now I'm kind of stuck with spraying this about every half hour, 45 minutes, probably 45 minutes to an hour, sorry, just to keep it moist. But I'm not in love with what I'm seeing right now, but we've been running at 200, so what we're going to do now is we're going to pick up our temperatures and hopefully render out some of the fat, and hopefully some of the moisture will come through our top here. I'm going to get out my pellets here. We had a full tube. We ran for about 4 hours. We're going to fill that up again, and now we're going to dial up to 275. So let's fill this up real quick. So right away, we're going to dial this up to 275 and push this guy along. Dump in some more pellets while we're here. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to let the pellet tube burn for about a minute, and then I'm going to blow it up. We're dialed up to 275. Now, one of the things I'm doing here, and I did this in my last brisket cook that turned out amazing, is we're jumping from 200 to 275. When we go to 275, we don't put as much smoke, so I'm breaking one of my rules, and I'm using a smoke tube for another 4 hours. So that'll actually give us about 7.5 to 8 hours of smoke tube in there, but I think we can get away with it because we're going to go to such a high temperature here, and it's Sunday. I don't have time to let this rest for a long time, so we may come back in a little while, and I may even push this a little further, but for now I'm going to try and leave it at 275 and let it push through, and I'll bring you back in a little bit. All right, so we're just over 9 hours since we started this process. 4 hours since I saw you last, so we went almost 5 at 200 and then 4 hours at 275. And I gotta say, one thing I noticed is once we went up to 275, we started to render some fat and it started to push up to the top, and we got a little bit of moisture up there, so it made me feel a little bit better. It was not as good as if the fat cap was on top, but I only sprayed every hour or so now. We'll have a look at our temperature here. We're about 172, 174, and we're gonna wrap it. I'm gonna give it a quick spray. I'm also gonna spray my paper just to make it a little bit more pliable. The other thing I'm gonna do is I am gonna put some tallow down here. And look, we're going to keep some heat in first. I'm going to paper wrap this for a change. I don't do that very often anymore. Let me put that down here actually. But what I want to do here is I want to speed up my cook a little bit. It is Sunday and I don't want to be here super late tonight. And this will just help speed that up a little bit. So we'll put some tallow down here. Put that out of the way. Whoop, don't fall on the ground. Let me get my brisket here and we'll show it to you a little closer. All right, so before I put that in the tallow, I'll give you a look here. So up top, we're not looking too bad. We've got a couple crispy spots near the end here and at this end a little bit, but not too bad. There's our fat cap taking all that heat in from the bottom. Definitely looks weird to me, but the things I do for you guys. One thing I'm gonna do is scoop a little bit and just put some on this edge here that got a little bit crunchy. This will just help soften it off a little bit. I'll do one more right here. Let's wrap this guy up. All right, so we're gonna give this a nice good old tight wrap here. Man, I have not really had to deal with flies yet, but I'll tell you what, before I even started cooking today, I saw the flies out this morning and I was like, oh, summer's coming. That means flies. So now we're rolled twice here, and I'm just going to go like so. Fat cap's on the bottom still. I'm just gonna grab this and just pull this in a little tighter. There we go. And what I've done there is I've put the flat a little closer to the stack this time. I rotated it 180 degrees. The reason for that is that the point was near the stack for the first 9 hours, and it is cooking just a little bit quicker. So this way I'm going to even them out, and I'll bring it back in a couple hours. We'll see where we're at. So it's time to pull this off. It has been a total of about 11 hours. So almost 5 hours at 200 and then 6 hours at 275. Let me pull this guy off, and I'll show you what the temperature's like, and then we'll let it rest. So what I did here is the point was to the stack for 9 hours of it, and then 2 hours of it, the flat was to the stack, right? Stack's your hotter spot as that air comes over there. But temperature wise, we're 205. I'm getting the center here. This end is a little hot. I got carried away, was sidetracked doing some other things. So, you know, we're at 208. Might be pushing the limits of it being slightly overcooked. Tenderness wise, it feels great. But we're gonna let it rest for a little while, and at the end of the day, if it's overcooked, it doesn't matter. I just wanna see if I like it fat cap up or fat cap down. So I'm gonna let this rest for a good hour. Daylight's escaping us, so I'm gonna try and push it an hour and a half. I'm just gonna throw it on the counter like this. So hopefully it'll come down in temperature on its own and should be low enough to slice in about an hour and a half. So it's been about 2.5 hours. As you can see, darkness has set in. It's not gonna get in the way of barbecue. Let's see what we got. I'll move this out of the way here. It's stuck a little bit there. And I got tallow for days here. And I definitely don't need this much tallow, but I'm gonna give a little bit on top of here just for the money shot. More than enough for what we need. There we go. So, not too bad. That fat stuck to the paper, but it just looks like a weird brisket to me. I never cook them this way. All right, let's slice into this bad boy. Not too shabby. I'm gonna go from the other side actually here. So I didn't cut that on the right angle, but this side had a little nudge on it. That's where the grains are going. A little crumbly on top, I think. I'm so aggressive with it. Got the dangle we're looking for. You can see, because we're so close to our heat source, we did get some of that yellow fat there. Pulls apart pretty easily. Great flavor. Really happy with that flavor. Let's take some of this burnt end here. Beautiful smoke ring. Great bite, really good bite there. You can see that fat seam between the point and the flat is nicely rendered out. It's one of the things I noticed when I was doing my last brisket video where I went up to 275 and used the smoke tube. With that higher temp for a longer period of time, I was able to get a much better, breaking down the collagen and rendering out the fat. It's just a better chew, better texture overall. And that's a great looking. Generally, I try not to use that smoke tube for more than half the cook, but on this brisket, second time in a row, I mean, it's got some great smoke flavor. I could fool some people with this brisket. They wouldn't think it came off a pellet smoker or pellet grill. It's just got a ton of smoke flavor into it. It turned out pretty darn good. Now, the big question is fat cap on the top versus the bottom. The one thing I noticed here, I just didn't like the way it dried out. Like a couple little spots here as I'm cutting, you know how you get your brisket overcooked and it starts to shred? I was getting a little bit of that effect, but this is not overcooked. This is pretty much spot on, but that top dried out really, really early. I didn't like it. The end got pretty dried on this one little part. You can see it's just gonna tear off there. So the big question is, are they lying to us about fat cap up versus fat cap down? Look, in my opinion, these are pretty darn close. I didn't like the way it got shreddy at the top, and I really liked that fat cap up on the Yoder because we get that airflow over the top. I think it renders out better. I think it protects it. And this one I had to spray constantly, whereas the brisket that I did, that is hands down my best brisket so far, I didn't even bother spraying. I used a lot of the techniques that I used today, but I didn't spray once, and it was phenomenal. If you want to check out that video, I'll link it right here. Highly recommend you check that one out because, as I said, it's the best brisket to date. I'll see you soon.